Today I'll be talking with Russell Huntamer about the wisdom of Seth. Russ, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So you turned me on to Seth Speaks a couple years ago, and the book is just so full of profound, wild ideas, and I thought it'd be really valuable to share that with people who are not familiar. So to start, could you just briefly tell me, like, who is Seth?
So what Seth would say, or what he often says, is that he is an energy personality essence no longer in physical reality. And he comes through Jane Roberts, who is an aspect of the same entity or soul, whatever you want to call it, that they share. And in some regards, you can think of Seth, a future self of Jane, but they are also their own sovereign individual selves with their complete free will.
So he used to be in a previous version of himself, a physically incarnated being, and then that physical body died, and then now this is just the residual energy.
So, or it is so like awareness is cumulative. So Seth is the culmination of the awareness that he has, and just like Jane or you or I are simultaneously that on this cutting edge of time. But he's doing this from outside of time space, which is a really difficult thing for us to understand, because we're down here with these ego personalities that wrestle with physical experience and the corresponding delusion of time and also the forward trajectory of it. But Seth frequently describes a lot of his reincarnations, and also includes his experience with Jane and her husband Robert, of which who has been around they've all been around the block with each other many times in many different lives and different settings throughout world history.
And it's always the same kind of scenario where she channels his words, or that they were all incarnated together.
Yeah, just as other people living different lives. Yeah.
Huh.
But for whatever reason, this time around, Jane honed her abilities of consciousness so much to the extent that Seth, as like a future aspect of her, was able to come through and to be able to basically to give her these insights.
Okay. So how does Seth fit into the hierarchy of energies? Would you consider him an angelic being?
He's a call me a spirit guide if you want to, but I'm not really a spirit guide.
Okay.
Because it's really funny, because what he's trying to come to do is basically dismantle a lot of belief systems that that are that have a lot of characters involved, and kind of a lot of complicated mythologies that can be really difficult to navigate through, and then we start kind of filling in the blanks with our own things.
Does it matter whether or not you believe Jane Roberts is channeling a future version of herself, or a higher conscious spirit, or could she just be making this up, but yet it's all very valid and relevant information for our own evolution?
Sure, and that's, I'm glad you asked that, because that's one of the biggest questions that I've had for myself all along the way. It's still something in the back of your mind wants to say, is there a chance that this isn't true? This is rather extraordinary. what Seth is delivering is one of the most pure and profound and is one of the most encompassing things, or is the most encompassing thing that I've ever ran across in my entire life. So,
Wow.
knowing, or like just having that reference, and including like my experiences with plant-based medicine and all that, like there's a way with this watertight way in which Seth describes things that really does encompass everything that I've ever experienced. It's the most, it's absolutely profound. And just he's saying these things, there's not, for me, like it's like there's not like holes in it. Like we're oftentimes where I can kind of get this kind of channeled stuff, and you're just like, well, then what about that? There's like a hole in that. Like I don't resonate with that. Just for the most part, 99% of the time, granted, it's still coming through Jane, so there are personality things that could maybe color the way in which Seth expresses, and there's also like vocabulary limitations, that would limit the way in which Seth can express himself through Jane. But overall, the most like self-evident and liberating, insightful, material I've ever ran across in my entire life. So, yes, everything that pretty much everything that I've read from Seth just stands on its own, regardless of whether or not Jane's making it up. And the thing about it is just like, if you read enough of it, there'll come a point where you will say to yourself, there is no way in hell that Jane Roberts could have made this up. It's based upon what I could say exactly what I just said a second. It's the most profound thing I've ever ran across. And
What are some of the fundamental principles that Seth talks about?
sure. So one of the fundamentals of the foundations to the whole thing is that everything is made of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That consciousness is not something that started to be, that is epiphenomenal to the brain, that we evolved to have, that we then started like broadcasting. Like consciousness is the foundation to the entire thing. And what we're experiencing is actually the expression of consciousness and the evolution of consciousness, and we're participating.
Okay.
And then so the next thing is like one of the main ones that Seth is harping on a regular basis, and how he'll will kind of back this up, is he'll use a lot of insights or information, or basically he'll use quantum mechanics to say how this is so. But the thing is a lot of the stuff that he says we did not really discover yet from a quantum mechanics point of view. And that's the other part about it, is like Jane doesn't know a thing about quantum mechanics, let alone is she capable of making predictions about discoveries in quantum mechanics. So the other one is, one of the main ones is you form your reality.
Okay.
Like you create your own reality. And we're not just talking about like in your head, we're literally talking about the way in which you co-create with consciousness, of which like how it takes shape and form and appears to you is part and parcel to the way in which you are looking at it. And we're seeing this in like scientific experiments. We're seeing this in the way in which waves and particles work, where literally the way that the wave, or this densely packed shimmering light that is the base structure material to all physical things, the way in which it's behaving is dependent upon the viewer. Therefore, there is this simultaneous co-creation of physical expression.
With the awareness as a creator, are you able to do something with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, it's all of a sudden you start to see yourself as playable in creating whatever is being physically expressed and creating your own reality, then you start to see the importance of being way more intentional with your thoughts and your speech and and also you see the necessity to clear up your beliefs, to find the reality model that is the most suiting to remain the most expansive and free from, just free in itself, but free from, say, like what a lot of old reality models encourage, which is like, guilt, feeling like you're a sinner, feeling like the body's a problem, feeling that, like, something that you did in all your past lives is what's causing you to be here in the first place, because being here in the first place is a problem. Physical reality is a problem, being down, whatever, all that kind of stuff,
Right.
of which, is not, all those things really aren't a problem.
If you feel guilt, then you would have to accept, one, that it's an old behavioral model, but that it's also a behavioral model that you are creating.
Sure, absolutely. It was part of like a collective dream. I mean, this all begins in our dreams.
Mm-hmm.
It was all a part of like a collective dream that we agreed to play a part in, but after a certain time, of which, like, kind of maybe consciousness gets bored with it, and it wants to insert something new. It still seeks to expand and create, and so we have to recalibrate the thing, or come up with a reality model that's more conducive or corresponds with that, like that freedom of of that's necessary for like optimal creation.
What's the recommendation for living in a space without guilt?
Because you are bestowed with the power of consciousness, you acknowledge that you actually are affecting this entire thing with your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions. Then certain things like guilt and whatever, feeling bad about maybe something you did to get here in the first place, are actually perpetuating the situation, or actually locking you into that reality, just by the very nature of like how this is created in the first place. About the very nature of like consciousness in itself. Like, well, that's how powerful it is, and that's how powerful we are. So all of a sudden you're like, there's no way in hell that I would do that anymore. It's bad for my reality. It's bad for my health. It's bad for my relationships, and all, it just ruins everything. So,
and yet
anyway.
We still do it.
Right. Well, there is actually, as far as like the subject of guilt, Seth does talk about like the different degrees of different kinds of guilt, right? There's that kind of Catholic guilt or whatever. But then there's also natural guilt, where we use it as like, oh, I did that. I behaved in this way, and I created a situation. So yeah, I would use that feeling to not do that. Maybe as a means to learn, but not to feel like you're gonna go to hell. Or that you're like a terrible person, or all that, that you need to feel bad about yourself in order to rectify the whole situation.